Welcome to The Happy Writer, a show about creating and sustaining a long-term author career. My name is Patty Jansen, writer of science fiction and fantasy. I've published independently since 2011. This show covers motivation, diversification, learning new skills, and your place in your career. Come on in and be happy. In episode 28 of The Happy Writer, I'm going to talk about print books. Should you do them? When should you do them? And what are the considerations? If there are only two things you're going to take away from this subject, they should be the following. In the first place, if you have the opportunity to do a print book and you have a fairly cheap way of doing so, you absolutely should. With formatting programs like Vellum, you can easily make a print file in about 5 seconds, and there is no additional cost involved with the formatting. There may be some added cost with a book cover, but most book cover designers offer an add-on option to have the print cover created. Depending on the price of the original cover, this can be as little as $50 extra, and even if you don't plan to immediately do a print book, you should buy that option. Even if you don't know the number of pages in your book yet, you can often defer having the print cover created until later. This is a reason to go with a well-established cover design company. For example, the only place where I am still using designs by someone else is my Returns of the Aegirian series. I had covers designed by Deranged Doctor in 2015, and they have since added print covers and audio covers last year, and I am in the process of redoing my print covers because with the move from CreateSpace to KDP Print, some of the dimensions changed and I had them fix it. A good cover design company will keep your files on record and you can go back to them later. But this aside, the second thing you should know about print books is that the traditional book industry, for whom print is the main source of sales, operates on a completely different model than the one we can access. They have print runs of thousands of books printed at once, stored in warehouses by distributors and shipped out to bookstores. The cost per book for these is as little as 50 cents. When we do our print books, we use print on demand, and this is a very different model. We cannot compete with a traditional model, and you should really abandon any illusion that you can try while using the print-on-demand model. But that doesn't mean at all that there is no point in doing print. Let's go into the options. When you upload your book to Amazon, you get the option to create a paperback. There is also a hardcover beta that I am in, and it works pretty much the same way. You upload your file, and this has to be a PDF. You upload a cover and then Amazon keeps this in their database and just creates one book when someone orders a copy. You can choose to do extended distribution, which allows Amazon to sell your book to third parties like Barnes & Noble and the Book Depository. The latter is also owned by Amazon. The Book Depository is extremely awesome, but I still do not recommend that you check the extended distribution box for reasons I will explain later. The books that are printed by Amazon will show on your book page and will also show as being in stock and being able to be delivered pretty much straight away. I will also come back to this later. It's an easy and fairly painless process that requires no technical knowledge of how to design a book. You just give the dimensions and the templates to your cover designer, and you can either use your own ISBN or use the one that Amazon gives you. It really doesn't matter. I've actually covered this before. Now, if you want to get your book into libraries and bookstores, you will find this is pretty much impossible if you distribute only via Amazon KDP Print. This is because bookstores hate Amazon and won't order, but more importantly, and also more boringly, Amazon just doesn't give the bookstores the retailer discount that they need to make stocking those books worthwhile for them, so that's going to be an uphill battle. The library distributors don't deal with Amazon at all. For those, you need to be at Ingram Spark. In the last few years, and especially since the start of the pandemic, Ingram Spark has become absolutely huge. It dominates the print-on-demand market, and many traditional publishers use them as well. With this market domination comes a certain disadvantage to us, namely that we have no choice but to accept their business model, and I'll get into that in a little bit. It's best to remember that none of these companies are your friend. Even if Ingram Spark is not Amazon, plenty of people still do not really like their terms or the fact that they have a monopoly, and the market is ripe for some disruption by a third company offering self-published writers better terms, but that aside. Uploading to Ingram Spark has become a lot easier recently, but you do need a little bit more knowledge of how the book industry works. Making an account is free, but when you upload and want to make live any of your books, they charge you a fee of $49 to set up your book. Since they also add an extra 20% on top of the printing costs as their own fee, I think this upfront fee is ridiculous, and a lot of other people think so too. It used to be that you used to be able to get codes that would get rid of the fee, but these days there are only a few ways that you can get these codes. The best one is to join the Alliance of Independent Authors. You get 5 free codes per month. And the good thing is that they also apply to revisions. By the way, you should never, ever distribute your ebooks through Ingram Spark. The model they use is just too inflexible for the kind of things you are likely to do as independent author, like run price promotions. There are a few other print options. Barnes & Noble also offers the option to do print books, and so does Draft2Digital, although the latter is in beta. I have applied but haven't yet been accepted. But both services also use Ingram Spark, but they don't charge you the setup fee. Of course, you get even less of a cut. And let's go to pricing, because this is where things get a little bit interesting. As I said, the traditional print industry can get books printed for as little as 50 cents per copy. It may be worth stepping back a little to see what their model actually is. When a new book gets published by a traditional press, typically they will produce a hardcover at a premium price, and then they will also produce an ebook which they will sell for $14.99 or something equally ridiculous, and they may produce an audiobook. After a while, they may also offer the trade paperback option. A trade paperback is a similar size as a hardcover, but with a paperback cover. These books are usually bigger and heavier than the mass paperbacks, which haven't yet been published at this stage. Trade paperbacks are also more expensive than mass paperbacks. If the books are still selling well, they may produce a mass paperback version. The mass paperback is what we would be familiar with as the pocket book, the smallest format printed on crappy paper and sold in cheap bookstores. In this model, the publisher hopes to make most of their money through the sales of the premium hardcover. They are then hoping to capitalize on any longer sales bump by making a mass paperback. As self-published authors with print-on-demand books, we simply cannot compete with a mass paperback. Our books are more like the trade paperback that sometimes gets published in between the hardcover and the mass paperback. So what then is your chance of getting into bookstores? And sadly, the answer there is not much of a chance. Traditional publishers have their print runs stored and handled by distributors, which is a wholly invisible part of the book industry to the general public. A distributor will have a number of sales reps that will take these books to the customer bookstores and will try to get them to stock the books. The books are then placed in the bookstore on a sale or return contract, which means that if the book doesn't sell after 3 months, it can be returned to the warehouse. In America, these books are usually destroyed, but in some other countries, they are actually returned and then enter the bargain market. Some people say that by marking your books as returnable on Ingram Spark, you can entice bookstores to take a chance on you. You could, but you could also be liable for a whole lot of back charges if a lot of your books get returned. And with the book market being as fickle as it is, whether or not a lot of your books get returned may depend on what else gets published that month, and other things that you have absolutely no control over. I would think this is not worth it. As a whole, I'm actually opposed to the whole sale of return model, so I don't mark my books returnable. I already accept that the traditional book-selling model is something I cannot compete with, and therefore I try to find my own niche. More than 50% of books these days get sold online anyway, so I feel getting copies onto bookshelves into bookstores is much less important than it already was for us. But if it strokes your ego, go ahead and take your book to your local bookstore, and if they're friendly, they might order a few copies from Ingram Spark. They won't order them from Amazon. The really good thing about Ingram Spark is that they also get your books into libraries, and libraries are a very good market. You can also sell print books direct through Ingram Spark. You can get a small print run done and sent to your house. But if you're like me and you're in a place where postage is going to kill any deal, then you can just let Ingram Spark do the distribution and the sending from the location nearest to the customer. So when you get an order on your website, you can go over to Ingram Spark, fill in all the customer's details, pay your special author's price for the book, and the book gets sent to the customer. Someone really needs to write a WordPress plugin that does this automatically, by the way. There are also authors who have gotten more creative. New local print-on-demand options open up all the time, but the killer is international distribution. If you sell a lot of books in just one country, go ahead and see if you can find a better local option for just those customers. But very quickly you will run into the fact that you're doing a lot of admin and you have to consider for yourself whether this is worth the effort. Some people go to a lot of book fairs, and it's totally worth for them to get small print runs done for much less than the cost of print on demand. But if you only sell online internationally, it might not be worth the effort. In the end, we will probably end up listing our print books through a whole range of options. Amazon doesn't really like Ingram Spark, especially since it has become so big recently. So if you only list your books at Ingram Spark and not through Amazon, they will mark your books as being out of stock. This can scare off some customers. You can then list your books at Amazon KDP Print as well, which is obviously what they want, because they make more money. As a benefit, you make more money too. If you're doing really well, you can find your own distributor. It all depends on how much time you want to put into it. When you choose to self-publish, print books are unlikely to be a huge percentage of your sales, unless you're in a couple of really specific genres, such as books for very young children or non-fiction. It's up to you to decide how much time you want to spend putting them up everywhere. Thank you for listening to the Happy Writer Show. Check out links and information about other episodes on my website at pattyjansen.com, where you can also find out about my books. You can support me by subscribing to the show or on Patreon at patreon.com/pattyjansen.